The winter wind screamed across the prairie like a wounded animal. Chief Lakota stood at the entrance of his lodge, watching the snow fall in thick curtains that erased the world beyond his village. He was 28 winters old, and the people whispered that he should take a wife. The elders spoke of duty and legacy. His sister brought eligible women to tribal gatherings, their hopeful eyes following him wherever he walked. But Lakota heart remained unmoved, frozen like the river that cut through their land. He had loved once, 5 years ago. Her name was Maena, and she had died bringing their child into the world. The baby, a daughter, lived only 3 days before joining her mother in the spirit world. After that, Lakota built walls around his heart higher than any mountain. He devoted himself to his people, becoming the youngest chief their tribe had known in generations. He was fair, strong, and wise beyond his years. But he was also alone, and he preferred it that way. The storm had been raging for 2 days now. Lakota had ordered everyone to stay inside their lodges, to keep fires burning and wait for the blizzard to pass. He was about to retreat into his own shelter when he heard it, a sound so faint he thought he imagined it. A cry, almost human, carried on the howling wind. He stepped outside, snow immediately stinging his face, and listened. There it was again, weaker this time. Without thinking, Lakota grabbed his fur cloak and pushed into the storm with determination. The cold bit through his clothes like wolf teeth. He could barely see ahead through the swirling chaos, but he moved toward the sound, trusting his instincts completely. Years of hunting had taught him to navigate by feel and instinct alone. The cry came again, and his heart quickened. Someone was out there, dying in the snow. He found her collapsed against a fallen tree at the edge of the village. She was covered in snow, her lips blue, her body shaking violently. A white woman, which surprised him. Her clothes were torn and inadequate for the brutal cold. Blood stained the snow beneath her leg. Lakota didn't hesitate. He lifted her into his arms, she weighed almost nothing, and fought his way back to his lodge. Inside, the fire crackled warmly. He laid her near the flames and quickly assessed her condition. Her breathing was shallow, her skin like ice. Frostbite darkened her fingertips. The wound on her leg was deep, a gash that looked like it came from a fall. She would die if he didn't act fast. Lakota had learned healing from his grandmother, one of the tribe's medicine women. He worked quickly, removing her wet clothes and wrapping her in warm furs. He cleaned and bandaged her wound, then made her drink warm broth, forcing it past her chattering teeth. For 3 days, she drifted between consciousness and fever dreams, trapped in a world of pain and confusion. She spoke in English, words he mostly understood from trading with settlers, though her accent seemed unfamiliar. She called out names desperately, William, father, mother. She cried and thrashed with surprising strength, fighting invisible demons that tormented her fevered mind. Lakota sat with her through it all, cooling her fever with wet cloths, making her drink, changing her bandages. He told himself he would have done this for anyone. It was his duty as chief, as a human being. But on the 4th morning, when her eyes finally opened and focused on him with startling clarity, something shifted in his chest. Her eyes were the color of summer sky, bright blue against her pale skin. She stared at him with confusion and fear, then tried to sit up. He gently pushed her back down, speaking in slow English. "You are safe. You were dying in the snow. Rest now." She studied his face for a long moment, then whispered, "Thank you," before her eyes filled with tears. Not tears of pain or fear, but something else entirely. Gratitude mixed with a bone-deep sorrow that Lakota recognized because he carried the same weight in his own soul. In that moment, looking into the eyes of this stranger he had saved, Lakota felt the first crack in the walls around his heart, and it terrified him more than any storm ever could. Her name was Catherine Miller, and she had been running desperately from a nightmare that consumed everything. As her strength returned over the following days, she told Lakota her story in fragments, each piece revealing deeper tragedy. She had come west with her father and younger brother 6 months ago, part of a wagon train heading to Oregon with hopes for new beginnings. Her mother had died of cholera on the journey, buried in an unmarked grave somewhere along the trail. Her father, broken by grief, had become dependent on whiskey. When they finally reached a settlement, he gambled away everything they owned and sold Catherine to a man named William Garvey to pay his debts. Lakota listened, his jaw tight with anger he didn't want to examine too closely. Catherine spoke matter-of-factly, as if describing someone else's life, but he saw the tremor in her hands, the way she couldn't quite meet his eyes when she talked about Garvey. The man had claimed her as his wife, though there had been no ceremony, no consent. He was cruel when drunk and crueler when sober. He beat her for small offenses, burned food, a sideways glance, speaking out of turn. "Where is your brother?" Lakota asked, keeping his voice gentle despite the fury building in his chest. Catherine's face crumpled. "William sent him away to work in the mines. Tommy was only 12. I don't even know which mine, which direction. He told me if I tried to leave, he'd make sure I never saw my brother again." She wiped her eyes roughly. "But I couldn't stay anymore. 3 nights ago, William came home in a rage. He had lost money at cards and blamed me somehow. He hit me so hard I thought he'd killed me. When he passed out drunk, I took what I could carry and ran. I didn't know where I was going. I just ran." She had walked for a day and a half before the storm caught her. Lost, freezing, her injured legs slowing her down, she had given up hope. Then Lakota found her, pulled her from death's embrace, and brought her back to life. As the days passed, Catherine grew stronger. She insisted on helping around the lodge despite Lakota's protests. She learned to keep the fire properly, to prepare food the way his people did. She was intelligent and quick to learn, picking up Lakota words with surprising ease. The women of the tribe were curious about her, some welcoming, others suspicious. Lakota's sister, Winona, became her unlikely ally, teaching her skills and defending her against whispered criticisms. Lakota found himself watching Catherine more than he should. The way she smiled at children who came to stare at her pale skin and light hair. The quiet strength in her shoulders as she worked. The haunted look that sometimes crossed her face when she thought no one was watching. She was beautiful, but that wasn't what drew him. It was her resilience, the way she refused to be broken despite everything she'd endured. It reminded him that surviving wasn't the same as living, a lesson he'd forgotten somewhere along the way. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Catherine turned to him with sudden intensity. "Why did you save me, Lakota? You could have left me to die. I'm nobody to you, and my presence here brings you complications with your people." He was quiet for a long moment, searching for words. "In our way, all life is sacred. You needed help. That is enough reason." "Is it?" She held his gaze. "Or is there something else?" The question hung between them like smoke. Lakota felt exposed, as if she could see through his careful defenses to the lonely man beneath. Before he could answer, shouting erupted outside. He moved to the entrance and saw several warriors gathering, their faces grim. His blood ran cold when he saw who stood at the center, 3 white men on horseback, led by a man with a cruel mouth and cold eyes. William Garvey had come for his property. He sat on his horse like a conqueror, a rifle across his saddle, his gaze scanning the village until it landed on Lakota's lodge. A smile twisted his lips, and Lakota knew with absolute certainty that this man would have to leave his village as a corpse or not at all. The time for running was over. For both of them. Lakota stepped out of his lodge with deliberate purpose, drawing every eye in the village toward him. His warriors formed a protective semicircle, hands resting on weapons, bodies tense with readiness, but he raised his hand for patience and restraint. He walked forward with measured confidence and authority, a man who had never backed down from any threat in his life. William Garvey's smile widened as he watched the chief approach, clearly enjoying the spectacle. Well, Garvey drawled, his voice carrying across the winter air. The savage chief himself. "I'm looking for something that belongs to me. A woman, pale skin, brown hair, answers to Catherine. She's a thief and a runaway. I'm told she's here." Lakota's expression remained neutral, though fury burned in his veins. "This is Lakota land. You have no authority here. Leave." Garvey laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "Now that's where you're wrong, chief. The law says a man's wife is his property, and stealing property is a crime. You're harboring a criminal. I could bring the cavalry down on this village for that." He leaned forward in his saddle. "But I'm a reasonable man. Give her back, and we'll forget this little incident ever happened." Behind Lakota, the lodge flap moved. Catherine emerged, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Her face was pale but determined. She walked to Lakota's side, and he fought the urge to push her back to safety. "I'm not your wife, William," she said, her voice steady despite the fear Lakota could sense radiating from her. "There was no ceremony, no vows. You purchased me like cattle. That's not marriage. That's slavery." Garvey's eyes went flat and dangerous. "Get on this horse, Catherine. Now. Or I'll burn this village to the ground and you'll have their deaths on your conscience." Lakota felt Catherine flinch beside him, but he spoke before she could respond. "You make threats you cannot keep. There are 3 of you and 40 warriors here. You would die before you lit the first fire." "Maybe so," Garvey agreed, his hand resting on his rifle. But the cavalry would come eventually. They always do. How many of your people would die then, Chief? How many children? He looked directly at Catherine. Is she worth that? Is a used-up whore worth the lives of everyone here? The insult ignited something primal in Lakota. He moved before thought, his hand shooting out to grab Garvey's coat and yank him from his horse. The man hit the ground hard, his companions reaching for weapons, but Lakota arrows were faster. 24 bows drew simultaneously, aimed at the mounted men who wisely froze. Lakota hauled Garvey to his feet, his face inches from the other man's. You will never speak of her that way again. You will never come to this village again. You will leave these lands and never return. Garvey spat blood from a split lip, but his eyes gleamed with malice. Or what? You'll kill me? That would bring the soldiers for certain. You're trapped, Chief. Whatever noble savage code you live by won't let you murder me in cold blood, and you know it. He jerked his chin toward Catherine. She's mine by law. White man's law, which is the only law that matters anymore. Your people are dying out, your way of life is ending, and you can't stop it. So give me what's mine before I take everything from you. The truth in those words stung because Lakota had seen it himself. The buffalo herds thinning. The treaties broken. The steady push of settlers westward, swallowing land and leaving nothing behind. But standing there, Catherine at his side, his people behind him, Lakota made a choice that would change everything. She is under my protection, he declared loudly enough for everyone to hear. By the laws of my people, I claim her as my wife. She is Lakota now. Your laws have no power here. Silence crashed over the village. Catherine gasped beside him. Garvey's face twisted with rage. But Lakota continued, his voice ringing with authority. If you want her, you must challenge me as her husband. Combat. Tomorrow at dawn. Just you and me. When I win, you leave and never return. If you somehow win, she goes with you. Garvey's eyes calculated, measuring Lakota's size and strength. Then he smiled slowly. Done. Tomorrow at dawn, Chief. I'll enjoy making you watch before I kill you. The village erupted in activity after Garvey and his men left. Warriors debated strategy while elders counseled caution. But in Lakota's lodge, a different storm raged. Catherine stood across the fire from him, her eyes blazing. You had no right, she said, her voice shaking. You can't just claim me as your wife without asking. I'm not property to be traded between men. Lakota absorbed her anger without flinching. You are right. I should have asked. But would you rather I let him take you? I would rather you trusted me to have a say in my own fate. She paced the small space, her hands clenched. I've spent months as someone's possession. I thought here, with you, I might finally be free. But instead, you've just made me a different kind of prize. Her words hit harder than any physical blow. Lakota sat down heavily, the weight of his decision pressing on his shoulders. I acted to protect you. But you are right. I took your choice. Catherine stopped pacing. Something in his voice drained the fight from her. She sat across from him, eyes searching his face. Why did you really do it? The truth. He looked into the flames, gathering courage. Because the thought of him touching you again makes me want to commit violence I've never felt before. Because watching you heal has reminded me what it feels like to hope for something beyond duty. Because somewhere in these past weeks, you stopped being a stranger I saved and became someone I cannot imagine losing. He met her eyes. Because I am falling in love with you, and it terrifies me. The confession hung in the air between them. Catherine's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I loved someone once, she whispered. Before everything fell apart. My mother's illness, the journey west, my father's decline. I loved a boy back home named Daniel. We were supposed to marry when he finished university. But life had other plans, and I learned that love doesn't protect you from the cruelty of the world. No, Lakota agreed. It does not. I loved my wife, Mayanna. I loved our daughter, even though I only held her for 3 days. Love did not save them. It only made their loss more unbearable. He paused, searching for the right words. But perhaps that is the point. Perhaps love is not about protection or safety. Perhaps it is about choosing to care deeply despite knowing the pain it might bring. Catherine wiped her eyes. You could die tomorrow. Garvey fights dirty. He'll cheat, use any advantage. I know. And if you die, he takes me anyway. That will not happen. How can you be sure? Her voice broke. How can you promise that? Lakota stood and moved around the fire to kneel before her. He took her hands gently, giving her every opportunity to pull away. She didn't. I cannot promise I will not die. No warrior can. But I can promise that if I fall, my people will not let him take you. Winona has already sworn to hide you, to help you escape if necessary. You will never go back to him. Whatever happens to me, you are free. Tears spilled down Catherine's cheeks. I don't want you to die for me. I am not dying for you, he said softly. I am fighting for the chance to live with you. There is a difference. She laughed through her tears, a broken sound. Then, slowly, carefully, she leaned forward and pressed her forehead to his. They stayed like that, breathing together, two wounded souls seeking comfort in shared warmth. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. If you win tomorrow, if you survive, I will marry you. Not because you claimed me, not because I owe you my life, but because somewhere in these frozen weeks, I started believing in hope again. And that gift is worth more than anything. Lakota pulled back to look at her, really look at her. And if you could choose right now, with no pressure, no threats, what would you want? Catherine smiled, sad and sweet and achingly beautiful. I'd want tomorrow to come quickly so we could start the rest of our lives together. But I'm terrified that Dawn will take you from me before we ever get that chance. They held each other through the night, two people bound by circumstance but choosing something deeper. The sun rose blood-red over the prairie, painting the snow crimson and gold. The entire village gathered in a circle. Lakota stood on one side, stripped to the waist despite the cold, his body marked with traditional paint. Across from him, William Garvey checked his weapons, a knife and tomahawk. Catherine stood with Winona, her face pale but composed. Lakota had said his goodbyes that morning. Now he thought only of the future he was fighting for. The rules were simple. No guns, no interference, fight until one man yielded or died. An elder raised his hand, and combat began. Garvey attacked immediately, rushing forward with the tomahawk swinging viciously. Lakota sidestepped, fluid from years of training. The blade whistled past his ear. He countered with his knife, opening a shallow cut across Garvey's shoulder. First blood. The white man snarled and became more cautious. They circled like wolves, looking for openings. Garvey feinted left, then lunged right, his knife aiming for Lakota's stomach. Lakota twisted away, but not fast enough. The blade caught his side, drawing fire across his ribs. Catherine's sharp intake of breath carried across the silence. Pain sharpened Lakota's focus. He remembered his training, his grandmother's words, a warrior fights not with anger but with purpose. He fought for Catherine, for the chance to heal broken places in both their hearts, for hope that love could bloom even in winter. They clashed again, blade against blade, steel echoing across frozen ground. Garvey was skilled. He'd clearly fought before, killed before. But his technique was rough, born of barroom brawls, while Lakota had trained since childhood. More importantly, Garvey fought with rage, while Lakota fought with purpose. The turning point came when Garvey overextended, putting all his strength behind a tomahawk swing. Lakota dropped low, letting the weapon pass overhead, and drove his shoulder into Garvey's midsection. They crashed to the ground, rolling in snow. Lakota's wound burned, but he held on. They broke apart, both breathing hard, both bleeding. Garvey's eyes held fear now. He was realizing he might lose. That made him desperate. He pulled a small pistol from his boot, breaking the rules. Gasps erupted from the crowd. But Lakota was faster. He threw his knife with deadly accuracy. The blade sank into Garvey's gun hand, and the pistol fell into snow. Garvey screamed. Lakota was on him instantly, wrenching the tomahawk away and pressing his forearm against Garvey's throat. Yield, Lakota commanded, his voice carrying over the fallen man's gasps. Garvey's face purpled with rage and lack of air. Never. I'll come back. I'll bring the cavalry. I'll see you all dead. Lakota pressed harder. Then you leave me no choice. He could end it here. But Catherine's face flashed in his mind. He didn't want to start their life with more death. He'd had enough death. Instead, he stood, dragging Garvey up. To the assembled crowd, he announced, "This man broke the terms. He is defeated. Let him be escorted to the edge of our lands. If he returns, he will not leave alive." Garvey spat blood. "This isn't over." "Yes," Lakota said calmly, "it is." As warriors dragged Garvey away, Lakota turned to find Catherine running toward him. She crashed into his arms, and he held her despite the pain, despite everything. She was crying and laughing, her hands checking him for serious wounds. "You kept your promise," she whispered against his chest. "You came back to me." Lakota tilted her face up to his. "Always. For however many days the Creator grants us, I will always come back to you." That spring, as the prairie came alive with bright wildflowers, the village celebrated a wedding. Chief Lakota married Catherine Miller under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. She wore traditional dress made by Winona's hands, and he wore his finest ceremonial clothing. When the elder asked if they chose this union freely, their voices rang out together strong and clear, "We do." They chose each other not because fate decreed it, not because circumstance forced them together, but because they had looked into the darkness and decided to create light. They had each other, and that was more than either had dared to hope for. Their story became legend in the tribe, told around fires for generations. The chief who wasn't looking for love and the woman who wasn't looking to be found, brought together by a storm and bound by choice.